President Vladimir Putin of Russia is one of the many leaders around the world who tries to stir up discord in the United States. His comments at a recent economic conference last week were no exception to this. Some of the things that he said specifically about former President Donald Trump caused no shortage of discord here in the United States. Let's look at some of his comments and what Putin's potential motive could be for expressing his opinion of our political state. So there was this conference, as mentioned, an economic conference in Russia called the Eastern Economic Forum. This took place on Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. And President Putin went off script a bit to talk not about economic relations in the East, but to discuss various figures in the United States. Talking about the various indictments that President Trump is facing, as you know from Julie Noted, I did an episode going through the various indictments. There were 2 state and 2 federal indictments against the former president, which include 91 total felony counts in 4 jurisdictions. Putin said of these indictments, quote, "What is happening in the United States is good for us, in my opinion, because it shows the rottenness of the American political system, which cannot pretend to teach democracy to others." On top of that, President Putin characterized the 4 indictments as, quote, "the persecution of one's political rival for political motives." And then, as a separate line of conversation, Putin was asked by a participant, if you will, in this economic forum, what he thought about the future of Russia-United States relations if Donald Trump gets reelected. And President Putin responded, "They accused Trump of special ties to Russia. It was complete nonsense, total BS. And he, more than anything, imposed sanctions on Russia. So for what to expect in the future, regardless of who is president," Putin said, "it's difficult to say. But it's unlikely anything will change definitively because the current government has configured American society in such an anti-Russian manner and spirit." So the really 3 important things here to take away is that, number 1, President Putin is saying that the Russian interference that supposedly happened in the 2016 election was, quote, "total BS and complete nonsense." He is characterizing the 4 indictments against Donald Trump as political persecution. And then number 3, he's saying that the United States is hypocritical because we claim to be about democracy, and yet, according to Putin, we are pursuing this political persecution against the head of the now opposition party. Let's discuss what Putin's potential motive could be for voicing these remarks. Now, of course, it's difficult to get into the mind of anyone who you don't know, or even those who you do know, and it is especially difficult to get into the mind of our enemy. But what is important for all of us to understand, and I think that we can all agree on it, is that President Putin does not have the United States' best interests at heart. We have been supporting Ukraine in Russia's war against Ukraine. We have imposed sanctions. Some debate whether those have been effective or not effective, but nevertheless, we have imposed economic sanctions on Russia as a result of that war. Additionally, President Putin, among other Russians, have been very upset at the decades of policy pursued by the United States that has tried and successfully done bringing former countries in the former Soviet bloc into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So President Putin doesn't exactly like us. We can agree on that. So we need to consider what effect he is trying to have with his words, because he's certainly not trying to do anything that would bolster us. So what's really going on? What President Putin said about the political persecution of Donald Trump with regard to these 4 indictments, I would say is partially true. There are some indictments, such as the campaign finance one that was filed in Manhattan by District Attorney Alvin Bragg, that appears to be blatant political persecution. It was this obscure law, this obscure violation of the way that the Trump organization wrote off a payment to Stormy Daniels, and Alvin Bragg went through all of these mental gymnastics to try to say that it constituted a violation of corporate finance law. Again, you can watch all of that on Julie Noted, but that specific Trump indictment is definitely political persecution. Now, there are other Trump indictments which appear to be in accordance with democracy. It actually isn't hypocritical of us to pursue these indictments, because one of the things about being a democracy is that we administer justice equally. Some people, no matter how high their political position, are not absolved from being brought to task for their alleged improprieties. And specifically with one of the indictments about the hoarding of classified documents, that appears to be an equal administering of justice, because President Trump is on tape bragging about the fact that he possessed classified documents, knew that they were classified, knew that he was not supposed to have them, or that he couldn't at this point declassify them, but nevertheless possessed them anyway. So what Putin is saying is partially true. Maybe he is just making these remarks to express the truth, to make a commentary on the United States. And of course, it is the case that even people who we despise, despicable people such as President Putin, can say things that are true. But I think that there's a greater motive here, which is that President Putin is trying to praise Donald Trump or say things that indicate that he supports Donald Trump, because he, that is Putin, knows that it is totally going to send the left wing in the United States on a crazy spiral. And he has succeeded, because whenever President Putin praises Trump, it gives the left a reason to go, see, this autocrat in Russia, Putin, loves our autocrat here in the United States, Donald Trump. What does this say about Donald Trump that this horrible, vicious leader, Putin, is so enamored with him? Chris Christie echoed this statement. He is the former governor of New Jersey, and in the wake of President Putin's remarks, he tweeted on X, or he X'd, I guess now that's a new verb with regard to tweeting. He said, quote, "It's good to see Vladimir Putin make his endorsement official. And no surprise, he's endorsed another autocrat." So right there we see Putin praises Trump. A lot of people who hate Trump use that as a reason to further malign Trump. And that appears to be precisely the point. We notice also that Putin is very careful when to intervene and make commentaries about American politics and when not to. For instance, in 2016 and 2017, when President Trump was accused wrongfully of colluding with Russia to win the 2016 presidential election, Putin was totally silent. Why? Because it benefited him. Here we had the left wing in the United States claiming that the president of the United States colluded with Russia and that Russia had outsized influence in the election. President Putin was like, I'm not going to deny that that happened. It makes Putin look more powerful than he was. He benefited from this lie that Trump and Putin colluded, because again, it made Russia seem like it had all of these avenues to infiltrate into the election system of the greatest power in the world, the United States. Also, I believe that Putin wanted to inculcate discord and division in the United States. He didn't want to come out and say, no, actually, we're not colluding with Trump. The election, we're not interfering, at least with Trump, to influence the outcome. Putin doesn't want to say that, because then it will perhaps mitigate some of the discord in the United States with regard to that issue. So I think it's not a coincidence that Putin sometimes is null on certain topics and then at other times amplifies them. The through line is that it benefits Russia. In 2016, it benefited Russia to remain silent and let them believe the Russia collusion hoax. In 2023, it benefits Russia to praise Donald Trump, to say that he is being politically persecuted, because they know it will have the same effect of creating this Trump hatred. And it appears that President Putin doesn't want Trump to come back to office, because President Trump, unlike other American presidents, was particularly harsh on Russia and also seemed to be particularly effective as a deterrent to Putin's aggression. Under the Bush administration, Putin launched an invasion of Georgia, the neighboring country, former Soviet Socialist Republic. Putin and Russia now controls about 20% of Georgia, that same territory that they invaded in the early 2000s under President Bush. Under President Obama, Putin famously in 2014 invaded Crimea and then stationed troops, Russian troops, in the Donbass region of Ukraine to, it seems, lay the groundwork for his subsequent all-out invasion of Ukraine. And we know, obviously, under President Biden, Putin went through with that and invaded Ukraine in its entirety. What's missing there? The Trump administration. There was no aggression that was pursued in that region by Putin during the Trump administration, which indicates, as I just said, that Trump was an effective deterrent to President Putin. So again, we have to try to see things from his, meaning President Putin's, malignant motives. He doesn't want what's best for the United States. It appears that Trump was effective in deterring his aggression. And so whether it's in 2016 or in 2023, he is either going to say or not say things that inculcate discord and make it less likely that Trump remains in political power. Thanks for joining me. Reminder to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay notified with every new piece of content. I'll see you soon. Take care.